The movie starts with Wyndham, an adventurous and maybe a bit stubborn photographer, who decides to head into the middle of the desert to capture the perfect solar eclipse. He drives his car down a road that simply disappears into nothingness, as if the asphalt decided the heat was too much and gave up on being useful. After stepping out of the car, Wyndham begins his journey on foot, equipped only with his camera and maybe a bit of arrogance. After snapping a few photos of the eclipse and realizing the day is ending, he decides to head back to the car. But, in a B-movie horror twist, he encounters a frightened boy who looks like he stepped straight out of The Exorcist. Despite Wyndham's good intentions to help, the boy isn't interested and points to where he lost his parents before disappearing into the darkness. Alone and without a car, Wyndham decides to take a nap on the ground because nothing says, "I'm a sensible photographer," like sleeping in the middle of the desert. During the night, he hears strange noises and, upon investigating, finds an art installation that's questionable at best. Bottles hanging between stakes, creating a melodic sound. At the bottom of a huge canyon, there's a wooden house with a woman singing as if she's in a Broadway musical. Wyndham, of course, descends to the house using an iron ladder that, like the road, decides to stop halfway and turn into an ordinary rope. There, he meets Alina, a young and mysterious woman who acts as if she's been expecting him. She feeds him soup and offers a place to sleep while he asks how to get out of this strange place. But Alina, always the enigmatic hostess, suggests he rest until morning. However, the next day, the ladder magically disappears, and despite all attempts, he can't escape the canyon. The situation starts to resemble that suspense movie where everything that can go wrong does go wrong. Things get worse when Wyndham tries to climb the canyon alone and ends up injuring himself. Alina takes care of him but doesn't give any answers about the strange events or the children he sees lurking at the top of the canyon. When he finally begins to recover, he encounters the children again, this time led by the boy who tortures him by asking his favorite color, as if they're in a dark episode of Black Mirror. The boy and his gang begin to taunt Wyndham, shaking the rope while he hangs like a piñata without a party. When he finally passes out from exhaustion and pain, Alina rescues him once again. But their relationship grows increasingly strange, as if she's as trapped as he is in that hellish hole. The next day, the children return, and their house seems more like a set from Rosemary's Baby than anything else. An interesting tidbit about this movie is that it was inspired by an urban legend about lost children in the desert who become something much more sinister. If I were in Wyndham's shoes, I probably wouldn't have gone down that ladder in the first place. After all, movies like The Texas Chainsaw Massacre teach you a thing or two about avoiding sketchy situations in remote places. I would have probably taken photos of the eclipse, headed back to the car, and never looked back. An interesting point is how the movie uses isolation and despair to create tension without relying on obvious jump scares. If you were in Wyndham's place, would you trust Alina or try to escape on your own? Leave your thoughts in the comments and stay tuned for more. Poor Wyndham, a man who just wanted a little peace and quiet in the desert, ended up becoming an involuntary gardener in a garden where strange children and Alina, the enigmatic housewife, reign supreme. He tries to question things, like any good horror movie protagonist would, but is always interrupted by suspicious screams in the yard. One night, after being warned by Alina not to go outside, Wyndham runs out and is greeted by a gang of costumed children who, after a brief physical attack, disappear into the darkness. Wyndham naturally demands answers. Alina, with the calmness of someone who has seen it all, or at least of someone who knows the ending won't be happy for Wyndham, just comforts him without admitting that she's a prisoner. Over time, Wyndham starts to settle into his new life, as if he's part of a bizarre, inescapable reality show. He even finds a wedding ring and car keys buried in the sand, like they're consolation prizes in this macabre competition. Then Alina reveals she's pregnant, leaving Wyndham absolutely stunned. He didn't even want kids, let alone with a woman he barely knows. But like any tragic hero, he accepts his fate, planting and replanting his garden, which is ironically destroyed by local birds. Then comes a touch of Lord of the Flies, when the boy in the cap promises to help but ends up being captured by the other wild boys. When Wyndham tries to teach Alina about the outside world, The conversation is more like a stand-up routine about cluelessness. She doesn't understand the concept of freedom because, after all, no one is stopping him from doing anything in the desert. The real climax occurs when the poor boy in the cap is cruelly crucified, and Alina, in a fit of rage, blames Wyndham for what happened, hitting him on the head and locking him in a cage. And this is where any seasoned suspense movie viewer would scream, "Don't go into the house," or "Don't trust Alina." But Wyndham, already consumed by the situation, tries to trick Alina into thinking he wants to stay forever and raise the child. A desperate attempt to escape the nightmare. Alina, of course, laughs at the idea of choice. Wyndham never had a choice. He's just a seed planted in the desert for a dark purpose. When the baby finally arrives during a solar eclipse, Wyndham has a brief, sweet illusion of fatherhood before his fate is sealed with his throat slit by the boy. Alina then packs up Wyndham's things, as if it's a melancholy farewell, while his body becomes fertilizer, closing the bizarre cycle of life in the desert. This story has a vibe similar to psychological horror and the oppressive atmosphere of films like Rosemary's Baby. An interesting fact is that during filming, the actors really spent days isolated in a remote location, which helped create the genuine sense of desolation and discomfort that permeates the film. There are definitely some things I wouldn't do in this situation, but I would certainly never have agreed to an extended stay in that creepy house, let alone tried to help kids dressed like little demons. I would have run at the first opportunity, preferably before finding wedding rings and car keys in the sand. Do you think Wyndham ever really had a chance to escape this fate, or was he doomed from the moment he set foot in the desert? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to check out the other videos on the channel. See you next time.
And I gotta tell you, it was perfect.